Here's how to make sense of what the president is doing. He's simply building a smokescreen. It's to detract from potential bombshells from Mueller's future testimony and likely from all those subpoena fights with Democrats that eventually will produce something. President giving his attorney general these sweeping powers, by the way, to revisit the Russia investigation, is the same president who just 2 days ago told Democrats he would block everything because they were, yes, revisiting the Russia investigation. Yeah, I know, hypocrisy in Washington knows no end. And on this news of the president opening up about what he wants Bill Barr to find, we couldn't think of two better people to talk to about it, and they both have the same last name. Jim Baker, who was the general counsel of the FBI during the origins of the Russia investigation and the investigation into whether the president obstructed justice. Barr's Justice Department is now investigating some of Mr. Baker's actions. And then there's Peter Baker, no relation. He's one of the most well-resourced reporters covering the White House. He's the chief White House correspondent at the New York Times, and he's writing a book with his wife on another James Baker. We just thought we'd throw in a third Baker just to keep it. At some point, maybe we'll get a Baker's dozen. Thank you very much. Jim Baker, I want to start with you. I want to start with something you alerted us to at the very end of the president's essentially executive order, because he is specifically ordering this attorney general to do this, not the attorney general of the Department of Justice, because at the end of this executive order, he says the authority in this memorandum shall terminate upon a vacancy in the office of attorney general unless expressly extended by the president. First of all, why is it the attorney general that's declassifying this information and making these decisions?
Well, because the president delegated that authority to the attorney general. The president can do that. I mean, some people have raised questions about whether there are statutory restrictions on the president's ability to do that. I don't read them that way. So historically, it is the president who decides what's classified, right, and it's the president who decides who can declassify something. Now,
we have a head of DNI, the director of national intelligence.
Director Coates, yeah.
Who's Dan Coates here. That position was supposed to sort of be the uber arbiter of intel and how it's, making sure we don't have the stovepipe issue and all of that stuff. Shouldn't he be involved in this?
Well, you would think so. He's the head of the intelligence community, and quite honestly, I think this executive order is a bit of a slap in the face to the DNI.
Why do you see it as a slap in the face to the DNI?
Because to my mind, it's the DNI's job to manage the intelligence community and to find out what happened. If the president of the United States has questions about what the intelligence community did, the DNI should get to the bottom of it. And this particular DNI played no role whatsoever in the 2016 matters, so he would have no reason to recuse himself or anything like that.
So he could be the perfect person and actually has the job title that comes with the authority to do it.
The job title, the existing authorities, and the reason that you needed this executive order is because all of the other executive orders and statutory authorities point the other direction, point toward the DNI himself.
Peter Baker, explain. It's hard not to look at this and that the White House made a political decision and that the president personally trusts Bill Barr here. Do they have any other explanation of why they've created this different path?
Look, they think it's better to be on offense than defense. This is a way of making the narrative about the investigators, not the investigated, right? Instead of talking about what President Trump did or didn't do, whether he committed violations or not, whether the House should be looking at, high crimes and misdemeanors, he wants the country to be talking about how this happened and frame the narrative around this idea that there was a hoax and a treasonous effort and a coup d'etat. And it's a rather extraordinary situation, as you put it, Chuck. It's not only that he's, sought out an investigation of his enemies or his perceived enemies. He has, as you said, told them what he expects them to find, which is pretty amazing. I can't think of any other president doing that. I can't remember Ronald Reagan or George H.W. Bush, investigating Lawrence Walsh or Bill Clinton after his acquittal in the Senate, saying, let's investigate Ken Starr and see how he did his thing. So this is a pretty amazing moment. Whether they're going to find something untoward there, we don't know. But as you also just put it, Dan Coates is a Trump appointee. He's been in charge of the intelligence community for the last couple of years. Chris Wray, head of the FBI, a Trump appointee, been in charge of the FBI for the last couple of years. Neither one of them has said, hey, we think things were pretty rotten before us and that there was some sort of coup d'etat that we need to investigate.
I remember when President Obama speculated that he thought Hillary Clinton's emails there wasn't major national security secrets on there in the middle of the investigation, and there was an uproar among many Republicans on Capitol Hill about the president of the United States prejudging an investigation, and the president both launched and prejudged an investigation right there. Jim Baker, should we trust Barr on this?
Well, so the Attorney General has delegated, as I understand it, I think the executive order gives us a bit more clarity about what perhaps John Durham is doing. As I understand it, the Attorney General is delegating this particular responsibility to John Durham to investigate. And so he's a professional prosecutor, and he will investigate this thoroughly under the supervision of the Attorney General. And so I don't know what else to tell you about that.
What more could be revealed? Because we've already had selective declassification based on some Devin Nunes theories of the case, and we went through this a couple of years ago, and every one of their sort of conspiratorial claims seemed to be undermined by the actual release of these documents. Do you expect the same?
Well, I was there. There was no conspiracy. There was no effort to engage in treason, a coup d'etat, whatever term you want to use. There was just none of that.
Did Peter Strzok do anything illegal?
Not to my knowledge. Not to my knowledge.
If he's guilty of anything, it's bad judgment? It's a fireable offense, perhaps, but did he do anything did he break the law?
I have not been made aware of any evidence that Pete violated the law. Pete or Lisa or anybody else violated the law in that regard with respect to the investigation. I didn't see anything that I thought was politically motivated in terms of actions or omissions on their part.
Let's say the Attorney General puts you in charge of an after-action report. What would be the legitimate documents you would want to see to make sure you knew this was done on the up and up?
Well, okay, it depends what you're asking me to do. Are you asking me to look at the efforts of the Department of Justice and the FBI? That is the jurisdiction of the Inspector General. He doesn't have, of the Department of Justice, he doesn't have jurisdiction to do anything else. The effort that is the underneath this executive order, I think, is more geared toward the rest of the intelligence community. So you start, pulling records and asking witnesses. I mean, you can only learn so much from the documents. You have to start talking to people.
And what obviously the intelligence community is nervous about, we'll hear the phrase sources and methods. Give me an example of what, and it's a hypothetical of sorts. I don't want you to give me a specific example in this case.
I won't give you, right.
No,
exactly.
I understand that. But give me explain a hypothetical that could be exposed that would suddenly endanger some of our methods.
Well, hypothetically,
yes.
If you had agents who worked for the United States intelligence community in Russia or elsewhere, hypothetically, and they sent reports to the United States, well, then people start to reveal those reports, and if you don't, if you're not careful about what you reveal, you could give the Russians enough information to go find those sources.
Arguably, you guys lost, the FBI lost an informant in Stefan Halper. I know you'll never confirm that, but the fact is, his name's out there. That's the type of damage that can get done, right? The exposure of people who have other jobs, who have been helpful to investigations in the past.
It's damage to prior sources, it's damage to current sources, and it's damage to potential future sources, because who wants to become a source of the United States if we can't keep a secret?
Peter Baker, is this, the president is somebody that he thinks everything is a deal in some form or another, right? So he went to Nancy Pelosi and said, I'm not legislating until you stop investigating. Does he think if he starts this investigation in justice that he could say, okay, I'll stop that if you stop yours? I mean, is this the type of strategic thinking that the president has put into this?
That's a great question. Is he capable of it? I guess a lot of things we've seen in the last 2.5 years indicate that he plays outside the box. He colors outside the lines. A normal administration wouldn't play it that way, of course. It would be seen as inappropriate to trade an investigation for another. But I think we've learned in this administration not to rule anything out. I think he thinks that this is something that's going to benefit him, even if it doesn't turn up the proof that he's looking for. It keeps the focus on the people who went after him. It means that they were illegitimate. It means that anything that they accuse him of, even now, people like Comey and Clapper and Brennan, they're all just partisans in the way Trump portrays them, and that muddies the water. So that at the very least, if you're supportive of President Trump, you have another narrative to hang on to, and locks in the electorate to where they are right now and how they view this episode.
Well, I do want to remind people, this is not the first time we went through this sort of FISA conspiracy theory here. If you recall, early in 2018, and I want to remind people all of the promises that many of the president's supporters in the House made about the declassification of these memos and what actually happened. Take a listen.
And I'm here to tell all of America tonight that I am shocked to read exactly what has taken place. I would think that it would never happen in a country that loves freedom, and democracy like this country.
What I read today in that classified briefing room is as bad as I thought it was.
You are describing the very elements of a palace coup. And after Jim and Mark Meadows and many others of us reviewed the intelligence information today, it is abundantly clear that the entire Mueller investigation is a lie built on a foundation of corruption.
All right, Jim Baker, you remember this moment back in January of 2018 when they did this. And when it finally went out there and people reviewed it, about the only people that thought there was something crazy there were the three people that I just quoted. There was no there.
There's no there because there wasn't any effort, as I said, to engage in any unlawful activity, any type of political activity, coup, treason, whatever you want to say. It just wasn't there. And there was oversight at many levels by the Justice Department, by the FISA court, to try to make sure that that didn't happen.
If this was a conspiracy, okay, how many people would have had to participate in it for these FISA applications? I mean, I don't mean to be this. I mean, if he's going down this road, this puts Rod Rosenstein, Jeff Sessions. I mean, where do we end?
There's a large number of people up and down the organizational chart.
Both sides of the aisle, right?
Both sides of the aisle who are involved in this, in the executive branch, the judicial branch, Congress.
You'd have judges involved,
yeah.
Republican-appointed judges. I mean, it does sort of, if you go down the logic road, it's beyond disbelief, and yet, how do you reassure the public that some of this is just oversold nonsense?
Well, this is why I've decided to start speaking as a person who was there at the time, who has firsthand knowledge, and I know there was no coup or conspiracy or any other attempt to engage in unlawful activity.
Peter Baker, is there anybody at Justice at all anymore raising a yellow flag?
Yeah, that's a great question, not one I can answer, I'm afraid. But that does lend itself to the larger question, which is, let's just say there was something wrong. Let's say it doesn't, maybe not treason or a coup d'etat or anything as fanciful as the president is saying, but maybe there were some mistakes that were made. Would anybody trust an investigation led by President Trump's attorney general to conclude that? This is a real problem in terms of credibility at this point. You have to imagine that inside the Justice Department, as you suggest, there are some people who are uneasy about this because it puts them in the position of questioning their career colleagues, not just political appointees of the last administration.
My concern, guys, is that this isn't an accident. The whole goal is to make everybody distrust all investigations. Then that levels the playing field in a way that perhaps the president is more comfortable. Hello, YouTubers. If you're watching this, it means you've checked out our channel, so thank you. Now do me a favor. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there. Click on any of the videos to watch the latest interviews and highlights from MTP Daily and MSNBC. You can get more Meet the Press content every morning in the First Read newsletter. If you're tired of content that you don't know anything about where it came from, you don't have to have that problem with us. NBC News, MSNBC, MTP, and the Meet the Press mindset right here for you on YouTube. Subscribe now.